Welcome to an Armeo on the Brink. I'm Armeo, and we have a lot to talk about tonight. It has been 2 weeks, feels like 2 years, but it's only 2 weeks. Things on the national scene have been wild and crazy. We have a blizzard of executive actions, bizarre cabinet picks, this rich tech guy breaking into federal agencies. MAGA supporters are just jubilant at all this disruption. Critics, I'm one of them, are pulling out their hair in frustration or horror, trying to figure out where they should be marching and when, and what to do. So I brought in an old friend from my roundtable days today, investment banker Mark Wittman, because we both want to talk about all of this with another roundtable colleague, Malcolm Nance. I think many of you know him. He's a former spy and an author, and he's an expert on extremism, paramilitary groups, and terrorism. He's fought in a lot of places, most recently in Ukraine. So if we run out of conversational matter about Trump's America, we can talk about that little hotspot too. But but let's get right into it. Malcolm, how bad is it?
Oh, you know what? Before I answer that, it brings to mind that cartoon panel from the TV show The Simpsons, and it says, where Bart Simpson says, "Today is a really bad day." And Homer Simpson leans over and goes, "It's a really bad day so far." It's going to and can get worse. We are only technically 14 days into this administration. Total global chaos is broken out, but it's all part of a strategy by Trump to keep chaos. He said that they were going to come into government in shock and awe, right? To
Right.
literally start signing executive orders. And Trump seems to think that government runs by executive order, and that now, with the new powers given to him by the Supreme Court, he's essentially a king. And he's behaving that way through fiat. However, we're starting to see the tears around the edges, certainly with the attempt to defund the entirety of the United States government last week for one day. Created chaos. It was very clear that upwards to 80% of people who are on SNAP, right, welfare benefits, are white Trump voters who are very poor. And Trump is behaving in this fantasy world that he lives in to solve problems that exist in this fantasy world with solutions that are fantastical. And we're just seeing the tidal wave after tidal wave of unending waves of incompetence. The not only with the hearings, the nominations. I mean, it's just awful. And now we've still got 1,600 some odd days left to go. So it's terrible. But what you're getting is an early test to see what ruling America looks like. This isn't governance at all. This is essentially a mad king coming in and ruling as he sees fit.
You seem to agree with Fareed Zakaria that a whole lot of this is performative. It's for show, the shock and awe part of it, and that it won't stick. But I have to contrast that with other stuff that you said recently.
Wait. I think he's wrong about that part.
All right.
I think he's wrong about that part. The shock and awe this part is none of this was designed to fail. This is literally a checklist of everything that was promised in Project 2025. They are systematically going through with it. And now with some of the disasters of nominees getting through, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, Tulsi Gabbard, all right, a woman who is an ally to our enemies, you know, was it, coddled up to a dictator, is going to get cleared as director of national intelligence. This person is not just incompetent, she's a threat to the national security of the United States. And now, just yesterday, Lindsey Graham comes out of nowhere and says he's going to vote for her. He's going to vote for Kash Patel as director of CIA, and he's going to vote to certify RFK Jr., a man who is a complete and total charlatan, who's caused the death of people with his views on viruses. This is designed to destroy government, because in the fantasy world in which they live, the United States is just an awful place and everything's terrible. And that, burning the government to the ground is the only way to save it in their bizarre fantasy world. And we are all going to pay the price for this.
So meanwhile, on the other side, the Democrats can't figure out what priorities to take, what methods to use. They're kind of wringing their hands. And I see great frustration on the part of citizens who just they want to march or pull down something or burn up something. There are no leaders on the Democratic side. There is no opposition.
I wouldn't say that. Okay. First off, what I think that they are slow on the mark to get is that, not that they lost. Look, they didn't lose this election by an enormous landslide. They did not.
No.
Donald Trump won 31% of the eligible voters in the United States. That's it. Kamala Harris won 30%. 40% didn't even deign to come out and vote due to the apathy which the Republicans have been building into the system. It is apathy and believing that your vote doesn't count, and that the election is decisive one way or the other, really worked more towards him. And then, there was a scenario that the Lincoln Project had put into an advertisement last August, where they spelled out a scenario where Trump won. And the first thing they said was Democrats became fractured and splintered along the lines of their special interest. And that happened. We lost Michigan because Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, 200,000 of them, voted for Jill Stein, who was only trotted out there. She is the most Manchurian of candidates. All right. She
twice now. Twice now that's happened because of her. Yeah.
She's literally an owned product of Moscow and the Republican Party. Same with Cornel West. These people who they come out and their job was to take votes. So was RFK. And then he was offered the secretary, the Secretary of Health and it's mind-boggling, the open, blatant corruption of this administration, and the Democrats were technically stunned. Now, if you look today, listening to their constituents, today they started to counterattack. Easy layups, right? Donald Trump almost crashed the stock market today with his tariffs. And he thinks that these are like great leveraging negotiating positions. He's unified Canada against America.
Yeah.
And to the point where
but Malcolm,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I should tell our listeners that soft-spoken shy guy is Malcolm Nance, and we're talking to him, an expert on extremism and terrorism about the Trump administration. You can tell he's a little exercised over it.
Yeah.
Didn't Trump actually score a victory today? Because the Mexican president, she caved a little bit. She said, "Okay, I'll send some troops up there. Stop this fentanyl."
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. First off, and another little thing that you might tell everybody is that I've written 4 top 10 New York Times bestsellers about the Trump administration.
Yes, you have.
You
predicted all of this.
Yeah, predicted all this from the perspective, from the analytical perspective of the intelligence community. And Trump was very easy to figure out. He's no different than any other corrupt dictator in sub-Saharan Africa or the Middle East. So it was very easy. But let's go back to the point about Mexico. Trump came out and made this announcement that she caved, right? The president of Mexico caved and committed to putting 10,000 additional troops on the border, and got out of Trump a promise to crack down on illicit gun sales from gun dealers in Texas that are flooding Mexico with AR-15s and pistols. Hundreds of thousands of guns are bought in Texas. Sometimes people, the law says you can buy as many guns as you want, and they buy sometimes 50 AR-15s at a time. And then the moment it's in the possession of a legal U.S. citizen, you could sell that out of the trunk of your car to anybody you want. So she got that concession. Here is the trick. Last year, no, 2021, Joe Biden did a surge on the border and got a commitment from the previous president to put 15,000 Mexican troops on the border to surge against immigration and drugs. Those troops are there. And in fact, they've drawn down 5,000, and she promised Trump to deploy 10,000 troops that are
Already
already
there.
physically at the border. She tricked
Interesting.
him.
Interesting.
No, because
Outwitted by a woman again. I love it. I want to bring Mark. We've forgotten you were here. Mark Wittman, investment banker, and he was on the round table with both of us. What do you got for Malcolm? What would you like to hear him orate on next?
Well, I'll offer one observation, and then I have a question for Malcolm, which is the observation is, and Rosemary, you and I read the same article in the Economist. Malcolm, you may have seen it, about Trump for Dummies. And
Yeah.
the first few stages of his plans, right, are to pick a real problem, talk about it in hyperbole,
Right.
because then when you have what you can call a little bit of motion in your favor, movement in your favor, you can claim victory, because the problem was never as bad as you hyperbolized it to be to begin with. And that's clearly what's happened with his alleged negotiations with both Colombia initially, and now with Mexico, and I suspect something's coming down the line with Canada as well.
Right.
Well, actually, in fact, today, this afternoon, Prime Minister Trudeau, or President Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau, announced that Trump and Canada had struck a deal, and that Canada would be surging and would be going forward with a $1.5 billion border enhancement program, and that they would be putting 3 officers and 3 actual customs detectives, 6 detectives, and 300 officers would surge to the border. Trump agreed to this and also suspended the tariffs for 30 days, proclaiming victory.
Yes.
Now, the kicker is that border initiative was announced last December under Joe Biden. Canada planned to do this, and that the actual components of this will take 6 to 10 years to get into place. And that the only thing that he committed to was 6 additional detectives to go on the squad for fentanyl investigation, as opposed to the 1,800 Canadian customs officers. And the 300 police officers would surge on an as-needed basis should there be a migration surge. Ready for this? From the United States to Canada.
Yeah.
This guy got rolled. I mean, this is, as you said, Trump, though, lives in an alternate reality where he thinks he's really getting something. And then in his mind, look, I'm sorry, he is a 78-year-old man who teeters on what could arguably be called dementia. I mean, standing and dancing to YMCA for 2 hours. I mean, this guy lives in this fantasy world of where these problems are emergent and immediate. His sycophant staff are the ones who are the cynical ones, right? Who know that this is all a lie, who know this isn't going anywhere.
And they still go along.
Yeah. And when the boss argues that this is an emergent and immediate problem, that he does that. It's absolute ludicrous.
Mark, you said you had a question, Mark. I'm going to push this.
Look, Malcolm, I guess there's two parts. One is Trump.
Sure.
If you look at why Trump was elected, the primary reason was Americans were displeased with their economic condition.
Led to believe America was on the brink of a recession in a horrible, horrible economy.
Yeah, or in the midst of it. And the reason they were so easily led is they were displeased with the cumulative effect that inflation had on them. Trump's threats are only going to make that worse. Americans didn't vote for him so we could reclaim the Panama Canal or claim Greenland. How long can he get away with this with his base?
Well, first off, with his base, I mean, look, my last book was about the violent fringe, the terrorists, the militias, and the bizarre embrace of QAnon amongst Republicans. It is doctrine now amongst them to believe that crazy conspiracy theory. Elon Musk is acting on it. Look, that's not why he won this election. Anyone that believes that this was economic issues is a liar. Okay? He won on pure racism, and he won on pure misogyny. Mm-hmm. Just that simple. There was no bad economy. This is the greatest economy in 50 years. It rivals Bill Clinton's economy. But the perception, if you are hammering every day on Fox News, look, before I was an MSNBC contributor, way back when, I was a guest on Fox News Saturday with Tony Snow, back when they had journalists, for the better part of a year and a half. And now they have become the propaganda arm of the White House. So when you're hearing over and over and over again, the economy is bad, this level of inflation is terrible, gas for a couple of days went up to over $4. It was at $3.25 at the time of the election.
Right.
But if you keep saying, which Trump does, he knows how to speak to the worldwide wrestling watching masses. The economy's horrible. The economy's horrible. It's terrible. Worst economy in American history. This is a disaster. Joe Biden doesn't do anything. And you have a White House that is traditionalist and is not counterattacking at that same level. Propaganda will always win.
So Malcolm, I got to cut in, Malcolm, because you're right. The media, I think, is completely done. He's toying with them now. He's kicking NBC out of their digs at the Pentagon. It's ridiculous. What about the military? Has he done the same? If there's protests like the ones that are going to happen on, I guess, the 5th of February, they're planning a bunch of marches. If he sends out the military and says fire on them, will they do it? There's no General Milley anymore. Where's General Milley?
That's true. However, look, fundamentally, and I've said this before on Roundtable and other shows, the military is comprised 40% of minorities and women. 40% of that force are people who they're referring to as DEI hires, mm-hmm. right? Diversity. Yep. Equity and inclusion, which, by the way, I did a good rant on my Substack last night. We call in the military teamwork, right? Mm-hmm. Diversity of thought, diversity of skill, diversity of ideas is cherished in the military. All right. We put it within the framework of discipline. But at one point, we were teaching the Japanese strategy of total quality leadership, which was diversity of thought, best ideas, moving forward, equity in terms of being equal as a force, in valuing you as a warrior, and then inclusion in that everybody makes this force lethal. Now they have officially, I said this the other day, they officially adopted white supremacy as the platform. And I have the proof right here in my hand. You can hear the paper. This is the memo from Defense Intelligence Agency removing every day and month of recognition in the year except for they're forced right now to go to work or to have a day off on Martin Luther King birthday and Juneteenth because they're by statute. They got rid of Black History Month, Women History Month, Holocaust Days in Remembrance, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, Pride, Women's Equality Day, National Hispanic Heritage Month, National Disability Employment Awareness Month, National American Indian Heritage Month. That today was announced force-wide at the Pentagon in a memo that said DEI is dead in the Department of Defense. And what's going to happen is the military will split. So if given a series of civil unrest and a series of unlawful orders, like shoot American citizens, the force will split along those lines.
Oh my God.
And what you will see, and I actually wrote a whole Substack about this, you will see the first mutiny in the armed forces where half the force will not obey that order. Because after the massacres at My Lai in Vietnam, when Lieutenant William Calley was given an order, very unambiguous order to kill everybody in the sector, he took it literally to kill everyone in the sector. And he killed over 200 or 300 women and children who had been segregated from the main force. And it took a courageous helicopter pilot to literally land his helicopter between the massacring soldiers and the civilians to get it to stop. Since that time, the armed forces have it hammered into their head. They have an obligation by law, the law of war, and the moral code to not follow an unlawful order.
But who decides if it's unlawful?
The
If
individual soldier.
So you
Shooting
see
a civilian, first off, shooting a civilian is unlawful.
Mm-hmm.
Shooting a civilian is unlawful by the laws of war.
Well,
it's a war crime.
So is disobeying an order from the Supreme Court, and yet Trump is doing it already.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to see, but it will split the force. And what you might get is force on, blue on blue combat. If I were as a senior NCO to get that order and it was a sincere order, I'd draw my sidearm and take the officer down and have him arrested. All right. I'd be like, bullshit. This force will not be killing its own civilians. No matter where those orders came from, they're unlawful. And there isn't a person who's going to stop against me. It will always be the officers who will push the junior white soldiers, I'm afraid to say, to do things through intimidation. But the force will split. They will start quitting, resigning, and ordering that they be arrested and court-martialed, where this will be brought before tribunals, where they can argue quite simply that it's an unlawful order, and it'll split.
Right.
But
Mark, how worried are you about civil disobedience and the need for any of these issues to be decided by the military?
I appreciate Malcolm's perspective, but I'm not that concerned. Malcolm, I think there's a long way to go between where we are and troops in America opening up on American citizens for simply protesting. Aren't there other breaks available to us, including Trump's need for popularity, that are going to help out? I mean, we did see when they shut the government down for a day last week, as you mentioned, there was enough blowback, apparently a lot of it through Republican lawmakers, that the administration had to very quickly re-examine what they were doing. I don't think there are enough circuit breakers in the system, but I think there are some. Are there not?
There are few left, very few left. The circuit breakers in the system wouldn't have gotten us Donald Trump, pardoning 1,600 convicted criminals.
But there was no. That's a unique one. There was no circuit breaker for that, was there? Other
There
than
was a circuit breaker,
Yeah.
right? That a president would be an honest arbiter and defender of the Constitution, that he wouldn't
Yes.
have carried out an attack on the United States government. Then, once back into power, would pardon people who were convicted not just of the insurrection that he rose up. He is now. They're talking about giving them preferential treatment to hiring.
Yep.
DEI for white insurrectionists. Look,
Right.
at this point, and I wrote in my last book, which was called They Want to Kill Americans. Before I even wrote that book, I said this on Real Time with Bill Maher, that that I had projected in 2020, if Trump won, these people would become self-appointed deputies to the Trump regime, their own brown shirts. And I think that is yet to come. I think that will truly happen. But look, if you're looking for circuit breakers, you're in the wrong reality, because we have already seen in 14 days, no circuit breaker has tripped. None. There are none. People power right now will be ignored. It's not about Trump being popular. It's about Trump being popular to the people who adore him. Okay? This is why, Hitler surrounded himself with Goebbels and Goering and all the rest of these guys, because they made the adoration real. If Trump were to see value, somebody were to tell him, you would show the ultimate strength against those dirty liberals, which, by the way, I hear all the time as I monitor right-wing extremism, he will make a show of force where people are killed.
Malcolm, people are asking, what can they do? They're sick of just marching or caring about their well-being. They want to do something. Is there anything a citizen can do at this point?
Yeah, there's loads that a citizen can do, but like I said, I've written a series of Substacks where the first thing you have to do, besides embrace the hard reality that that we are literally right now hurtling headlong into dictatorship. We're well on our way into tyranny, right?
Yes.
Government is just being dismantled around us. Every facet of what made us comfortable Americans in our age, I'm 63, is going away. It's going away. It's already being damaged, smashed.
So what do we do about that?
You have to be realistic about what's happening. That's the first thing. The first article that I wrote about this on Substack, called What Happens If the Tyranny Comes for You? You have to be realistic that there's a possibility that things could get so bad over the next year that the system might view you as somebody who is worthy of their attention, right? The eye of Sauron, right? This is, or your neighbors who were Trump voters. I had people you were on with me 2 years ago when somebody removed the bolts on the wheels of my car at Dick's Sporting Goods because I had a Biden bumper sticker on my car. The intent was to get me to crash at high speed on the highway. People need to understand that they right now, number one, need to start viewing their world from a protective perspective. How will you take care of yourself, your family, if tariffs go in and food skyrockets, or he keeps deporting people and the basic staples start to go away or start to devolve to where things get bad, or bird flu goes out of control, which it apparently is already on its way, and it's already jumped to humans.
It has jumped to humans. Yes.
Eggs are already almost off the shelf at $7.50. It was $3.25 just recently at a Walmart that I went to for regular eggs. Your world may start to look very, very weird. The point is you have to figure out, how am I going to protect my family? And the most important thing is, one, organize yourself and your family for potential hardship. Two, Now you have to organize your community in a local level. And I recommend that people organize no larger groups than 5, what I call committees of 5, right? Like Jefferson's original committee of 5. And that's people you meet face to face. Our biggest drawback is a lot of people live in cyberspace. They live on Facebook, they live on Twitter, they live on Blue Sky, and they communicate within that. And they don't seem to understand MAGA doesn't live in that world. MAGA lives at Walmart. MAGA does road marches with their vehicles. All right. MAGA came into my goddamn front yard and took down a 8-foot banner that I had up last year that said, all it said was truth over lies. And someone got so offended. This wasn't even election year. They got so offended they stole the banner, the ropes, and the uprights that were in the ground to get rid of it. Wait till they see the new one that I have, which says I took an oath to the Constitution, not a lying dictator. That comes up this week.
Yeah, that won't provoke anything.
I have one of the biggest houses in the county, and it's it's the last street you're on to go to Walmart. So
go ahead. So organize
yourself
and your family, organize your community.
Organize your community in tight groups of people you can speak to face to face. And people say, well, why is that? Why are you going to have this? I think they're more akin to the Revolutionary War vigilance committees where people, you can read the newspaper, but it's more visceral if you know what your neighbors are thinking and you are aligned with people that you can get together in case a protest comes. You have 4 other people in yourself that will come.
Yeah, it sounds like the bubbles that we created during COVID. People you could rely on in emergency. It sounds just like that.
But this bubble will be off of cyberspace. Yeah. We don't want people meeting on Facebook for this. Yeah. We want people to go to a cafe, go whatever. Now, that being said, one of the things that I thought was very good, and I bragged about it, was when they started Indivisible, it was just a guidebook. And one of the few, the national organization is sort of a failure, right? They just would go on TV and talk, and they never really provided the small groups, the local indivisibles, with anything other than form an indivisible group. Indivisible New York 19 is one of the ones that was really active back when Gibson was it not Gibson? Who was what's his name? Fazio, right? Fazo Fridays. They turned a Friday micro rally at his office into the biggest community event in Columbia County every Friday. They got to the point where hundreds of people showed up.
Do you have more advice? You've got those points, and I'm pushing you, Malcolm, because we're running out of time.
Okay. But those are the big things that you need to do, is that you need to organize at a small level so that you can come together collectively if you're going to protest, they've got to be civil. One of the things that I warn about is we do have liberal groups. We have anarchist groups that bring medics and former military people who've carried guns at protests. This just can't happen. We have to embrace the complete nonviolence model, even if it includes just sitting down, interlocking arms. But we can't do like Black Bloc and the way the Free Palestine people did it, with giving Trump a reason to kill people. Right?
It sounds like we're going back to Malcolm. I mean, not to Malcolm X. We're going back to Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King. Yes, but now, there was a great article out recently that said it requires 3.5% of the population to rise up to have a real revolution, to have so much impact. Just 3.5%. That's 11 million people. We couldn't get, I think the biggest protest march ever in history was the Women's March.
The Women's March, yes. Yeah.
It immediately, the minute that march was done, it dissolved into infighting because people wanted to control it, as opposed to having a common theme. We need to bind together on the defense of the nation, and that's the unifying theme.
And on that note, I'm afraid I have to end this. We have about 1 billion other questions. But we have run out of time. We obviously have a need to bring you back. This is a topic that is not going to go away. We end our shows with the toast, and this is an easy one. It's like "Viva la Revolution." We need it. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Malcolm, and I appreciate your time.